everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Thank you all for the love and support you've shown me and the channel.
JJK The Culling Game Chapter 68 to 83. Chapter 68. Deadly Sentencing. 1249 words. Rinji's body collided violently with Sukuna. The resulting shockwave rippled outward with the two of them at the center. This wasn't a shockwave triggered by a normal curse technique, but a collision of pure strength. Ishigori, you idiot. Reggie cursed inwardly. You're supposed to stay safely behind and deal basic attacks. What the hell are you doing rushing in? To the side, Kinji's and Maki's expressions changed as well. They only realized that Sukuna's strength was far greater than they had imagined when they arrived. Only now did Maki realize that Rinji had actually been fighting a monster like this all this time. Hikari Kinji cast a wary glance at Sukuna, and hurriedly shouted to Maki. Fall back. Leave the battlefield to Rinji. If we stay behind, we'll only be a drag. Maki looked at Rinji, gritting her teeth in frustration. She knew Hikari was right. Given the speed and power Sukuna was currently displaying, Rinji was the only one who could keep up. As the two of them retreated, the entire battlefield was left with nothing but the echoing sounds of Rinji and Sukuna constantly clashing. As their speed was too fast, Mei's broadcast crows couldn't capture them clearly at all. The viewers could only vaguely make out two streaks of light in the midair over Tokyo, colliding against each other over and over again. Looking at Sukuna, who showed no exhaustion at all after fighting him for so long, Rinji cursed furiously in his mind. This piece of trash. Sukuna has a place to replenish his cursed energy, but where am I supposed to go to rest? Rinji's heart sank lower and lower. If he only fought against Sukuna with his slashing technique, Rinji could still try to outsmart him with his current body. However, Sukuna currently had the buff from Yorozu's armor. Once Sukuna's curse technique burnout ended and his technique recovered, Rinji would definitely die. I had to find a way to get rid of Yorozu on Sukuna's body. Rinji's brain thought frantically, and the information in his mind began to run rapidly. Suddenly, a black flash appeared in Sukuna's punch, but Rinji took his punch and grabbed his hands. I caught you, Sukuna. Sukuna, who was actively trading blows with Rinji, suddenly noticed him, who should have instinctively dodged his attack, abruptly stopped and actively leaned into his hand. Before Sukuna could even react to what happened, the injured Rinji actually burst out laughing instead. Sukuna, I've found a way to defeat you. A way to defeat me? What on earth is this brat talking about? Sukuna's face blanked. Even though he felt he couldn't lose, Rinji's words still made him shake with fear. In that split second of Sukuna's distraction, Rinji grabbed his arm tightly and violently dragged Sukuna down from the sky. Higuruma. Sukuna's expression changed. He immediately pulled backward with force, attempting to turn his arm free. However, Rinji's grip was incredibly powerful, and Sukuna couldn't pull it out in that single instant. Right at that moment, three figures suddenly appeared out of thin air in the middle of the battlefield. Sukuna looked up and he recognized two of them. Yuji Itadori, and the other was the jujitsu sorcerer he saw while using Yuji's body, Ui. The last person was someone Sukuna had never seen before, a young man wearing a suit. He didn't look like a jujitsu sorcerer but rather more like a lawyer. After recalling the name, Higuruma, that Rinji yelled at the end, Sukuna immediately realized that this mysterious man in a suit must be the Higuruma that Rinji was talking about. The next moment, Sukuna knew exactly what Rinji's plan was. Higuruma looked at Sukuna expressionlessly and spoke slowly. Domain expansion, deadly sentencing. Ui possessed the ability to teleport people, but this teleportation carried a cost and required the user to control it. Therefore, before the battle began, Rinji established the timing for the use of Ui's ability with the people from Jujutsu High. Rinji's shout just now was the signal for Ui to use his ability to drop Higuruma onto the battlefield to open his domain. Higuruma's domain could put someone on trial, and different crimes carried different levels of punishment. Furthermore, a person could have committed many crimes, and Higuruma couldn't actively choose which one to prosecute. To ensure that Sukuna would be sentenced to death by Higuruma's domain, during their pre-battle strategy meeting, Renji had Higuruma repeatedly pull Yuji into the domain. Renji only had Higuruma stop once the domain finally selected the Shibuya massacre case for Yuji. As long as Higuruma entered the battlefield together with Yuji, and pulled both Yuji and Sukuna into the domain as accomplices, Higuruma's domain would definitely be able to sentence Sukuna to death. However, why did Renji believe that this was the way to defeat Sukuna? This brought up a hidden mechanic of Higuruma's domain. A domain belonged to a type of barrier technique, expanding outward in a circular fashion to trap people inside. Normally, there are two scenarios when a domain expands. First, the domain expands unconditionally, indiscriminately pulling in everyone within its radius. Second, the user can precisely alter the barrier's conditions, designating specific coordinates or circles to pull in only chosen targets while those outside are pushed away as the domain's outer shell expands. However, Higuruma's domain was an innate domain that came with his curse technique, and a rare third scenario existed for it. Before deadly sentencing opens, Higuruma must personally select the target of the trial. Afterward, the domain would only pull the selected people inside for trial, and everyone else would be pushed out by the domain's outer shell. And coincidentally, Yorozu, who was attached to Sukuna, counted as other people. Yorozu wasn't a Shikigami. She merely chose to attach herself to Sukuna of her own free will. Sukuna's body also didn't possess a different dimension to store cursed spirits like Suguru Geto did, and couldn't truly store Yorozu in an absolutely safe place. If Sukuna had genuinely accepted Yorozu's love from the bottom of his heart, he might have been able to form a master-servant binding vow with her, similar to Toji Fushiguro and the inventory curse. In that case, Yorozu might have been counted as a part of Sukuna and brought into the domain. Unfortunately, Sukuna didn't care about Yorozu at all in his heart. To Sukuna, Yorozu was nothing more than a convenient little tool he had picked up on a whim. Yorozu had attached herself to Sukuna entirely through her own intense personal desire. There was no form of mutual binding vow between the two of them. Thus, the moment Higuruma's deadly sentencing pulled Sukuna into the domain, the cursed spirit Yorozu, who had been attached to Sukuna's body, was instantly pushed out directly. Yorozu blinked, looking left and right in utter confusion. Where is my Sukuna? Where did my Sukuna go? Yorozu's gaze instantly locked onto the domain in front of her. She could feel that Sukuna was inside. Give me back my Sukuna. Yorozu screeched and was about to rush into the domain to find Sukuna. But just before she could touch the barrier, a pair of powerful feet from the side kicked her flying away directly. Looking at the cursed spirit Yorozu, who crashed into the ruins, Renji promised her. Don't you worry, I will definitely remember to kill you with a cursed tool this time. Chapter 69, Chapter 69, Trial 1393 words. The sound of rapid running echoed once again, and three figures appeared on the battlefield. The first two were naturally Hikari Kinji and Maki, who just left a moment ago. After retreating from the center of the battlefield, they had been observing the situation from the corner. The moment Sukuna was pulled into Higuruma's domain, the two of them immediately rushed back. As for the third arrival, it was none other than Itadori's devoted older brother, Choso. Choso absolutely couldn't accept the idea of Yuji coming to such a dangerous place all by himself. After Yuji and Higuruma entered the battlefield, he rushed over immediately as well. Maki's eyes swept over Renji's shoulder, which had just been pierced by Sukuna's razor-sharp claws. In a matter of mere seconds, the bone-deep puncture wound had completely healed. If it were before, Maki wouldn't think much of it because Renji knew how to use the RCT. However, the current Renji had locked away his cursed energy. Renji's recovery relied purely on the innate healing factor of his body, and the fact that he could instantly heal his own wound under these conditions was simply too terrifying. Suppressing the envy in her eyes, Maki pulled a Nioi staff from behind her back and tossed it to Renji. Renji-san, here is your weapon. UI just delivered it. I figured you'd be needing this right about now. That's a huge help. I was just worrying about not having a cursed tool in my hands. Renji caught the staff gratefully. If Kashimo Hajime were present, he would have instantly recognized this Nioi staff as his own weapon. After Renji accidentally ran over Kashimo like a speed bump, he picked up Kashimo's curse tool and took it. This particular curse tool actually suited him quite well. Renji had messed around with ordinary curse tools a few times before, but whenever the output of his lightning-cursed energy got too high, those regular tools would easily melt from the electricity. Kashimo's staff, however, was specifically designed to store electrical charges. It possessed an exceptional level of electrical resistance, meaning it wouldn't break even under the maximum output of Renji's lightning-cursed energy. After swinging the staff in a circle within his hand, Renji pointed it fiercely toward the cursed spirit Yorozu. "Let's go." Just as Renji led his comrades to focus their fire on Yorozu, Sukuna's trial inside the domain also began. Deadly sentencing domain. For a rule-based domain like deadly sentencing, when it expanded, the rules automatically entered the minds of everyone inside the domain. Thus, as Sukuna stood at the defense stand, he gradually understood everything. Noticing that Yorozu had already disappeared from his body, Sukuna knew that Yorozu was pushed outside by the rules of the domain at that moment. If I can't get out of here quickly, Yorozu will definitely be killed by that brat and the others outside. Currently, the Shikigami, judgment, inside the domain has already begun to state Yuji's charges. Itadori Yuji is suspected of murdering a large number of civilians in Shibuya on October 31, 2018. Higuruma immediately launched into his defense of Yuji according to their plan. Itadori did not commit murder. His admission of guilt was merely a lie driven by an intense, overwhelming sense of responsibility. The real culprit is him, Ryaman Sukuna. Without the slightest hesitation, Sukuna confessed to the crime. Even though the executioner's sword could pose a massive threat, staying trapped inside any longer would likely be even more dangerous. Hearing Sukuna plead guilty, Yuji's face lit up with joy, and he looked at the Shikigami with anticipation, waiting for him to sentence Sukuna to death. However, under Yuji's bewildered gaze, Higuruma suddenly spoke up. "Wait, Your Honor, I object." Yuji instinctively wanted to question Higuruma, but when he saw Higuruma's serious expression, he swallowed the words in his mouth. He didn't know that after the strategic meeting ended, Renji and Higuruma secretly talked. Renji pointed out that the battlefield changes in the blink of an eye, and a situation might arise where they needed Higuruma to stall Sukuna to buy them time. Under those circumstances, Higuruma's primary objective would no longer be sentencing Sukuna to death. Instead, it would be keeping Sukuna locked inside the domain to buy time for the people outside. The moment Higuruma noticed that Yorozu on Sukuna's body hadn't entered the domain along with him, he instantly deduced the situation. This is exactly the situation Renji talked about, where he needs Higuruma to buy time. He only needs to stall Sukuna inside the domain, and give the people outside enough time to eliminate the cursed spirit Yorozu. Higuruma put his pedigree as a top law graduate from the University of Tokyo on full display, continuously spouting meaningless legal jargon and nonsense inside the courtroom. Sukuna's face darkened as he stared at Higuruma. He wanted to end the trial as quickly as possible, but at this very moment, Sukuna truly had no way to deal with Higuruma. Higuruma stared at Sukuna expressionlessly, talking non-stop with filler arguments. This method of stalling for time was not absolutely safe either. Even though violence was forbidden inside his domain, it was not forbidden outside the domain. Furthermore, Sukuna's domain happened to be an open-type domain. As long as he expanded his domain inside deadly sentencing, Sukuna could completely use his own malevolent shrine from the outside to attack the outer barrier of deadly sentencing, thereby shattering Higuruma's domain. In the original timeline, the main reason Sukuna was willing to accept the trial was mostly that he wanted to see Higuruma's executioner's sword. Moreover, Sukuna also saw through the flaw of Higuruma's domain, which was that it prioritized confiscating a cursed tool rather than a cursed technique. Therefore, in the original timeline, Sukuna had no fear of the outcome of Higuruma's domain trial. Just as the situation inside the domain fell into a deadlock, a figure abruptly appeared in the courtroom. It was Maki. They had already finished off Yorozu and rushed in from the outside of the domain. Maki took a running leap, raised both of her feet, and kicked Sukuna right in the face. "You little brat." After flying by the kick, Sukuna rolled violently across the courtroom floor. As he stood back up, Sukuna tried to counterattack Maki, but the exact moment he rushed to Maki's side, his movements ground to a halt. "Sir, violence is strictly prohibited in this courtroom, please return to your seat." Higuruma's voice rang out once more, directly enforcing the restriction against Sukuna's violent behavior. Yet, when it came to the exact same violent behavior from Maki, Higuruma acted as if he hadn't seen a thing. The reason for this scenario was very simple. The rules inside any closed domain in the Jujutsu world required the target to possess cursed energy for the restrictions to be enforced. Maki's current state was that of a heavenly restriction with 0 cursed energy, and the domain recognized him as an inanimate object, meaning the domain restrictions didn't apply to her. This was exactly why heavenly restriction users were called the Banes of Jujutsu sorcerers. It was because a Jujutsu sorcerer's domain expansion wasn't a guaranteed hit against them. Nevertheless, Renji designed this tactic for Maki, as he still wouldn't be able to enter the domain because of his cursed energy. The plan was to have Higuruma expand his domain to trap Sukuna, while Sukuna suffered from technique burnout, allowing Maki to exploit her heavenly restriction physiology to bypass the domain's barrier and kill Sukuna inside. After a few moments, Maki grabbed her split soul katana and chased after Sukuna to kill him. Since Sukuna couldn't use violence to fight back, he could only use his basic cursed energy reinforcement to accelerate and dodge. After another miserable dodge, Sukuna barely managed to protect his heart, and even had one of his arms chopped off. He glared at Higuruma with absolute anger. Hey. You're the court administrator here, right? It's because of lawyers like you that the legal system in this country is completely ruined." Higuruma shook his head with a puzzled expression. "What on earth are you talking about, sir? I am a citizen of this country too, and I don't feel like there's anything wrong with our legal system at all." Chapter 70, Executioner's Sword. 1406 words. Sukuna suddenly burst out laughing. Nobody could tell whether he was laughing because he was genuinely amused or simply because he was completely out of options. Just as Maki was preparing to continue his relentless attack on Sukuna, she suddenly felt the aura inside Sukuna's body spike slightly. After a brief second of thought, Maki realized instantly that Sukuna's technique burnout had ended, and he was about to open his domain expansion again. Sukuna found a loophole inside the domain. The absolute non-violent rules only dictate what happens inside the courtroom. Judgment or Higuruma didn't have authority over what happens in the outside world. This means that Sukuna will be able to release his domain from outside without hurting inside the courtroom, exactly like how he destroyed Gojo's unlimited void in their domain clash. "Higuruma-san, now." Maki hurriedly turned to Higuruma and shouted, "Sukuna's technique is about to recover, sentence him to death quickly." But despite his current annoyance, Higuruma's movements did not falter for even a split second. Suddenly, judgment behind him directly snapped its eyes open. Confiscation. Death penalty. The instant Sukuna was convicted, Higuruma's domain began to dissolve, granting Sukuna the freedom to move properly once more. Yet, Sukuna didn't feel a single bit of joy in his heart. Feeling the empty sensation inside his body, Sukuna knew that his slashing technique was confiscated by Higuruma's domain. Unless he could kill Higuruma ahead of time, he probably wouldn't be able to use his slashing technique for a very long time. Sukuna's eyes swept over the exorcised cursed spirit Yorozu not far away, and he didn't feel the slightest bit of surprise in his heart. After shifting his eyes away from Yorozu's corpse, Sukuna scanned every person present one by one, and his gaze grew increasingly solemn. Maki, Kinji, Choso, Higuruma, Yuji, and Renji stood there in combat stance. He didn't recognize most of these people, but just by observing their stances, Sukuna could tell that every single one of them was troublesome. Since Sukuna was currently in his weakest state, Renji naturally called everyone directly to join in on a group beatdown. If it weren't for the sake of preventing any unexpected plan, he even wanted to call Yuta and Megumi over to beat up Sukuna together. Of course, not every person present would stay behind to fight the battle against Sukuna. Hiromi Higuruma cautiously approached Renji from behind. Suddenly, a burst of bright light emerged from the original gavel in Higuruma's hand. In the next instant, the gavel continuously expanded and elongated, and in a brief moment, a sword of light appeared in Higuruma's hand. This weapon was none other than the Executioner's Sword, the one-hit kill manifestation of Higuruma's curse technique. Higuruma placed the sword into Renji's hand, and then slowly backed away. To ensure that Sukuna's technique wouldn't recover, the plan dictated that once Higuruma confiscated Sukuna's technique, Yui would teleport him back to the Jujutsu High. Meanwhile, the Executioner's Sword would be handed over to the most suitable Jujutsu sorcerer on the battlefield. Currently, the most suitable person on area was naturally Renji and Maki in terms of physical prowess. Renjio took the sword from Higuruma without hesitation. Higuruma-san, you head back first. We'll come find you after we finish off Sukuna. Higuruma nodded at Renji. All right, I'll head back to Jujutsu High first and wait for your return. In the next instant, Yui's figure appeared behind Higuruma. With a swift wave of the bedsheet in his hands, Yui and Higuruma vanished from the battlefield simultaneously. Right at that moment, Sukuna's voice suddenly came from ahead. Is that really a good idea? Renji looked at Sukuna with confusion. What do you mean a good idea? Sukuna smirked faintly. I mean, is it really a good idea to let Higuruma go back? If something happens to him while you guys are all out here, won't my curse technique just return to me? Renji sneered, raising the Executioner's Sword to point at Sukuna. What nonsense are you spouting? The place Higuruma went to is absolutely safe. You'd better worry about your own skin instead. However, in the very next instant, the smile froze right on Renji's face. After a few seconds, the Executioner's Sword in his hand shattered instantly. There was only one possible explanation for this phenomenon. Something had happened to Higuruma. Jujutsu High. With a sudden flash of white light before his eyes, Higuruma knew he had successfully returned to Jujutsu High. However, before he could even stabilize his footing, a voice that had clearly been waiting for a long time suddenly echoed from behind him. Hi there, Higuruma. Higuruma turned his head in confusion, and he saw a man with a stitch scar across his forehead waving to greet him. As the information from his memories surfaced, a specific name instantly flashed into his mind. The culprit behind the sealing of Gojo Satoru, the mastermind who single-handedly orchestrated the Culling Game, and the most evil jujutsu sorcerer in history, Kenjaku. Why are you here? Higuruma looked at Kenjaku in shock. However, Kenjaku had no intention of explaining. He looked at Higuruma with a beaming smile. I'm sorry, Higuruma, but Sukuna can't be allowed to die here just yet. Otherwise, the Culling Game won't be able to proceed. Therefore, domain expansion, womb perfusion. The exact moment he saw the Executioner's Sword shatter in Renji's hand, Yuta stood up instantly. In the next instant, he turned his head up to look outside the building. There lay the teleportation coordinates set by Yui, the place where he brought people returning from the battlefield. Higuruma is dead. That's impossible, Kusakabe-sensei is still over there. To ensure the safety of those who returned, Jujutsu High had arranged security measures at that location. The strongest Grade 1 sorcerer, Kusakabe Tsuya, was supposed to be guarding it. However, when a massive wave of cursed energy that clearly didn't belong to Kusakabe surged from that direction, Yuta finally became certain. It's Kenjaku. Kenjaku has infiltrated. Through the crows left at the scene, Meimei immediately utilized her shared vision ability to confirm the intruder's identity. Yuta instantly rushed toward the teleportation coordinate. He didn't understand how Kusakabe completely failed to notice Kenjaku sneaking in when he was clearly right there. Teleportation coordinates. Takuma Ino, who was also serving as a guard, shouted frantically at Kusakabe, Kusakabe-sensei, something happened to Higuruma-san. Quick, take down Kenjaku. Suddenly, a cold sweat instantly poured down Kyuzukabe's face. Meanwhile, on the battlefield. After sensing that his curse technique had been fully restored, Sukuna grinned widely. He instantly formed the Enmitten hand sign, preparing to expand his domain on the spot. Renji's expression changed. He looked around at Maki, Kinji, Choso, and Yuji. If Sukuna's domain successfully manifests, we will probably all die under the slashing attacks of his malevolent shrine. By this point, Sukuna's left and right hands had already completed the hand sign. Renji knew he no longer had any opportunity to stop the expansion of malevolent shrine. In the very next fraction of a second, Renji's body vanished from his original spot. He unleashed his full speed, slammed his hand onto Sukuna's chest, and pushed his entire body directly toward the distance. Since there is no way to stop Sukuna's domain expansion, I will push his domain away from the direction of Yuji and the others. Feeling the violent impact against his chest, Sukuna looked at him with a distorted face. You really live up to expectations. I didn't think you could actually go this far. From Sukuna's perspective, Renji's attempt to protect his comrades was incredibly foolish. As with this direct physical contact, the requirement for cleave, which required direct skin-to-skin contact among Sukuna's slashing techniques, was perfectly fulfilled. Then die for your actions, you foolish brat. A massive number of powerful world-cutting slashes surge into Renji's body along the point of contact between him and Sukuna. Even though he possessed a body that surpassed a heavenly restriction, Renji couldn't withstand so many world-cutting slashes at close range. A line of blood erupted across his skin instantly, and his entire body began to totter violently. I don't think so. Renji looked at Sukuna with bloodshot eyes. This is the biggest difference between you and me, because I have comrades, do you? You're out of your mind, brat. Chapter 71, Chapter 71, A Fulfilling History 1675 words. In the final moments before his life faded away, Renji looked at the malevolent shrine that was on the verge of expanding around Sukuna. He knew all too well that once Sukuna expanded his domain, breaking it a second time would be incredibly difficult. Renji roared in his heart. God, let me break it just one more time. Just once. At the very least, force Sukuna into a curse technique burnout. Suddenly, Renji felt a new surge of strength emerge inside his body once again. With a furious roar, he slammed down on Sukuna with immense force, throwing his entire body viciously against the ground. Under the effect of the tremendous force, a deep crater was smashed directly into the ground. Sukuna also coughed up a mouthful of blood from the force of Renji's strength. Normally, a mere fatal injury like this wouldn't matter at all to him. But for some unknown reason, the exact moment the blood left his mouth, Sukuna was unexpectedly choked by it. In the next instant, the cursed energy inside Sukuna's body fell into complete chaos, and the malevolent shrine, which was about to be successfully expanded, collapsed because of this. Looking at the shattered domain, Renji smiled with satisfaction. At the final moment before collapsing, Renji looked back at Yuji and the others and shouted at the top of his lungs. This is the last of my Hammon. Take it from me. As everything happened too fast, by the time Yuji and the others reacted, all they saw was Sukuna's collapsed domain once again, and Renji, who had been sliced into mango cubes. Yuji froze in disbelief. Immediately after, tears streaming down his face, he wailed toward the sky. Renji. The system space. Looking up at the familiar ceiling of the system space, Renji sighed helplessly. In the end, I still couldn't do it, huh? Even though he didn't think he could win at the very beginning, he once gained the upper hand after fighting Sukuna for so long. Before the challenge officially ended, Renji even thought that maybe he really could win. It was only when he returned to the system space once again that Renji finally accepted reality, realizing that he was just deceiving himself the entire time. Even his final rush to push Sukuna away was driven by the delusion that his body could withstand Sukuna's point-blank slashing attacks. It turned out he had somewhat overestimated his own physical durability and couldn't withstand it. He scratched his head in frustration. He died too suddenly and didn't even have enough time to say a single piece of trash talk to Sukuna. However, Renji relaxed again when he remembered that Sukuna wouldn't remember him during the next challenge anyway. This official duel with Sukuna brought up many emotions inside him. Sukuna is seriously quite strong. By the looks of it, Sukuna hadn't even gone all out yet. He suspected that even if Yorozu didn't intervene midway, Sukuna still would have won. Sigh, I wonder if Yuji can defeat Sukuna in the end. After finishing speaking, Renji didn't expect the system to reply. The system's answer made him sit up straight instantly. Does the host wish to view the subsequent development of the plot? System, what did you just say? In order for the host to better discover their own shortcomings, the host can continue to watch the subsequent development of the world after a failed challenge. Holy crap! Why didn't you mention such a huge feature earlier? He was completely dumbfounded. The system had never mentioned before that he could watch the development of the world after his death. Then, Renji waved his hand. I didn't participate in the previous ones at all, so it didn't matter whether I watched them or not. But I participated in this challenge for so long, and I really want to know if Sukuna was defeated after my death. Then what are we waiting for? Hurry up and bring it on. Suddenly, the world after his death unfolded before him once again. As Sukuna's domain expansion was interrupted, he fell right back into a state of technique burnout. Yuji, Hikari Kinji, Maki, and Choso immediately began to gang up on Sukuna. Seeing Renji's death, Yuji unleashed an 8-hit black flash right off the bat, completely catching Sukuna off guard. Yuji was the main attacker, Hikari Kinji and Choso provided support, while Maki acted as an assassin, launching sneak attacks. Yet, even when facing 4 of them, Sukuna managed to hold his ground, relying solely on the basic application of cursed energy. While the battle raged on intensely at Shinjuku, the scene cut over to Jujutsu High on the other side. Through the omniscient perspective, Renji finally learned what had happened to Higuruma. That bastard Kenjaku had somehow snuck into Jujutsu High without anyone noticing. He had timed his ambush perfectly, catching Higuruma right at the exact moment he returned. Although Higuruma's life was saved thanks to Kuzukabe's timely intervention, his curse technique was interrupted. Yuta Okatsu, who arrived on the scene, immediately expanded his domain and engaged in a massive battle against Kenjaku. Kenjaku's original goal was just to ambush Jujutsu High and then quickly flee. However, Kenjaku still underestimated the strength of the pure love, Yuta Okatsu. Kenjaku, who lived for 1,000 years, ultimately failed to escape and fell into Yuta and Rika's hands. Meanwhile, during the exact interval when Yuta and Kenjaku fought their battle, Sukuna, who fought continuously against Yuji and the others on the battlefield, finally ended his technique burnout. Just as he was about to open his domain once more, Megumi Fushiguro successfully arrived at the Tokyo battlefield. As soon as Megumi entered the field, he told Yuji and the others to run away quickly, chanted a ritual, and went right up to clash violently with Sukuna. However, Sukuna, who had recovered his curse technique, wasn't afraid of Maharaga. Since Sukuna didn't have much cursed energy left, he chose to completely blow Maharaga to death through Fuga. Just as Sukuna thought that everything was over, a person he had never expected appeared on the battlefield. Renji, who was supposed to be dead, bizarrely showed up out of nowhere. This scene almost scared the absolute shit out of Sukuna, making him think Renji had developed some kind of new form and resurrected on the spot. However, Renji knew that the truth behind all of this was that the people from Jujutsu High secretly picked up his diced mango pieces body while Sukuna fought Maharaga. During Shoko Yeri's emergency reassembly, Renji's corpse was fully and seamlessly pieced back together. Yuta Okatsu, who killed Kenjaku, successfully obtained Kenjaku's brain-hopping technique. Through the brain swap, Yuta directly piloted Renji's body, stepping back onto the battlefield, taking his body with him. Even though there was barely any cursed energy inside Renji's body, Yuta had plenty. Before officially joining the battlefield, Yuta used Renji's curse technique release. After Sukuna used every possible way to break down Renji's body, Yuta directly activated his cursed technique release, transforming into a beast form to clash with Sukuna once more. After fighting for a full 2.5 hours, Sukuna's cursed energy was finally drained completely by Yuta. Following a final blast of sonic cannon from Yuta, Sukuna ultimately met his ultimate defeat. Afterward, the Jujutsu world finally ushered in its ultimate victory. Following Sukuna's death, peace finally returned to the Jujutsu world. Year 1 of the post-Renji era, Yuta Okatsu inherited the position of the head of the Gojo clan. Year 2 of the post-Renji era, Yuta Okatsu's ideals clashed with the higher-ups of the Jujutsu world. The higher-ups believed that credit for killing Sukuna should go to Yuta Okatsu, rather than an unknown like Renji. However, Yuta rejected the higher-ups' proposal, insisting on clearing Renji's name. Year 3 of the post-Renji era, the Jujutsu higher-ups attempted to assassinate Yuta Okatsu in order to replace him with a more submissive Gojo clan head. However, the assassination attempts failed. That same year, Yuta Okatsu took dominant action, executing multiple Jujutsu higher-ups, and completely seizing control over the discourse of the Jujutsu world. Year 22 of the post-Renji era, the Jujutsu sorcerers from the homeland of Miguel finally managed to weave another black rope. That same year, after Yuta personally visited him 3 times to show respect, Miguel finally handed the black rope over to Yuta. With the assistance of the black rope, the invincible Jujutsu sorcerer Gojo Satoru, who had been sealed for nearly 22 years, was finally unsealed. After leaving the prison realm, Gojo Satoru learned about everything that had happened with Sukuna years ago through the explanations of the Jujutsu High. After learning of Renji's existence, Gojo remarked with emotion, "I really envy him. The battle with Sukuna must have been so fulfilling." After declining Yuta's request to return the title of the Gojo clan head to him, Gojo shifted to serving as the principal of Jujutsu High, beginning to fade from the active spotlight of the Jujutsu world. Year 68 of the post-Renji era, aliens from outer space descended upon Earth. Under the threat of Dabura Kuraba, the Jujutsu world decided to dispatch Jujutsu sorcerers to fight the opponent. By this time, Yuta Okatsu had long since passed away, and Yuji spent his days playing pachinko and couldn't be found. Gojo Satoru, who hadn't died because he was sealed in the prison realm for so long, was still serving as the principal of Jujutsu High. By the collective nomination of the Jujutsu world, Gojo Satoru, who was 76 years old biologically, took command and marched out to battle Dabura. No one in the Jujutsu world knew what the final outcome was. They only knew that after Gojo returned, Gojo uttered a single sentence. That was a very fulfilling fight. Year 70 of the post-Renji era, at 78 years old, Satoru Gojo passed away peacefully of old age in a hospital bed. Afterward, the world observation officially came to an end. Chapter 72. Chapter 72. The Lonely Peak of the Strongest. 1354 words. The moment he saw Sukuna officially defeated, a smile involuntarily broke across Renji's face. Thank goodness, haha, as long as everyone could achieve the final victory, Renji could rest easy. He didn't really care about his own death anyway since he could resurrect. However, what surprised him even more was that the system's observation didn't stop after Sukuna's death. Instead, it concluded with the final death of Gojo Satoru. The battle between Gojo Satoru and Dabura, in particular, left him watching with a pounding heart. Having continued to hone his techniques for several more decades, the already powerful Gojo had reached an entirely new level of strength. Renji felt that even if Sukuna, with the 10 Shadows technique, were to stand before Gojo now, he wouldn't be much more than a speed bump. Gojo Satoru could absolutely be considered the strongest Jujutsu sorcerer in history, excluding Modulo Yuji Itadori, of course. Gojo Satoru's later years were lonely. He had no family by his side to keep him company, and he spent his days dealing with the various mundane chores of the Jujutsu world. The long-term overwork and the friction between different forces had already overdrawn the old man's body. In the year 68 of the post-Renji era, when Gojo was chosen to duel the Dabura, he muttered to himself, "This might just be the last battle I ever fight." No one expected that the old man's words would turn out to be a prophecy. After the fight with Dabura, Gojo Satoru's mental state steadily deteriorated, and he passed away 2 years later. Looking back at Gojo Satoru's entire life, he was the final bearer of the 6 eyes in the Gojo clan. He once conquered everything alongside his best friend Suguru Geto, awed the entire jujitsu world, and was called the strongest jujitsu sorcerer of the modern era. But a few years after joining Jujutsu High, Gojo and his best friend Suguru Geto developed differences because of a clash in ideologies. According to the records of the jujitsu world, Geto Suguru, the best friend with whom Gojo Satoru shared the closest bond, betrayed him and flew away from Jujutsu High, riding a cursed spirit. After the night parade of 100 demons plot was exposed, Geto met his demise in battle while piloting the special-grade cursed spirit Tamamonome to launch a sneak attack on Yuta Okatsu at Jujutsu High. Gojo Satoru felt immense grief after he arrived on the scene. Why would a special-grade jujitsu sorcerer lose in battle? What was the reason? In fact, even if he had come back, we wouldn't have held him accountable. What will be, just let him go. Kento Nanami, who became a jujitsu sorcerer, lamented that jujitsu sorcerers are nothing but shit. Consequently, Gojo Satoru did everything in his power to become a teacher, attempting to break free from the cyclical laws of jujitsu history. He wanted the sorcerers to remember that they were human too, and that he was no different from ordinary people. But in the end, Gojo Satoru failed. He grew too old, his burdens became too heavy, and he found himself in a completely helpless position. When he saw that after Yuta's death, the ring Yuta had originally left to his granddaughter, Yuka Okatsu, was forcibly taken by the Gojo clan, and handed to her older brother, Tsurugi Okatsu under the pretext of insufficient strength, tears flowed from his eyes uncontrollably. He thought of the deceased Yuta Okatsu. He worked so hard to suppress the corruption of the jujitsu world and nurture his own children, and yet was this kind of Gojo family all he got in return? After his death, the new principal of Jujutsu High took an alternative approach, and began to criticize Gojo Satoru, attempting to make the jujitsu world forget his existence. But by then, Gojo Satoru was long gone, and no one would know how the jujitsu world would behave. As the world observation closed, the system's evaluation finally began. The current challenge has concluded. Your results are now being calculated. Deaths, 12 cause of death, killed by a direct hit from Sukuna's close-range slashing attack cleave evaluation, the plan and battle intent were flawless. You even pushed Sukuna into a corner multiple times. If you tried one more time, you might actually win. Rewards, a massive increase in cursed energy, increased cursed energy manipulation, increased combat skills, enhanced durability, and adaptive evolution. However, Renji's joy didn't last long. The moment his eyes swept over the list of rewards, he jumped straight up. Hey. System, you son of a bitch system, you didn't pocket my rewards, did you? How can my rewards be so few? The host must be joking. The rewards for this challenge have been provided here. Seeing the system play dumb, Renji yelled. Where are the cursed techniques? I'm asking you where the cursed techniques are. Didn't you say that defeating a sorcerer who possesses a cursed technique would grant me one? I defeated so many sorcerers in this challenge, how do I not have a single cursed technique reward? The host may have forgotten, but the drop rate for cursed techniques is tied to the difficulty of the battle. The combat power of the sorcerers the host defeated was too low, so it is perfectly normal for the drop rate to be low. Renji's expression froze. He suddenly remembered that there actually was such a rule. But even so, it shouldn't be 0. Wasn't my fight with Sukuna incredibly intense? As soon as he mentioned Sukuna, Renji straightened his spine with confidence. If this still failed to meet the system's required difficulty, he would report it to the higher-ups. However, a single sentence from the system made all of Renji's anger deflate instantly. Did the host win? Okay, I guess I didn't. But what about Kashimo Hajime? I definitely won against him. The host has already acquired the curse trait, which is connected to the technique Mythical Beast Amber by defeating Hajime Kashimo. You can only obtain one curse technique from the same opponent. He couldn't help but take a sharp breath of cold air. Prompted by the system's reminder, Rinji realized that despite fighting for so long, and having such a battle during this challenge, the only person he had actually fought seriously was Kashimo. As for Yorozu, Rinji had basically treated her like a speed bump, so the system clearly hadn't counted her at all. He slapped his thigh in deep regret. "Aw, damn it. System, why didn't you remind me? If you had said something earlier, I would have picked a fight with Ryu Ishigori." Even though Ryu Ishigori had been treated as a speed bump by Sukuna in the original timeline, he definitely possessed real strength. If Rinji had held back a bit and fought him with everything he had, there was a high probability that it would have satisfied the system's difficulty requirements. He would have walked out with a new curse technique right now. Now that things had reached this point, Rinji could only let out a sigh. Whatever, it is what it is. I could just get it again next time. He turned his eyes toward his system panel. Name, Rinji Kuratsuki. Grade, Special Grade, Cursed Energy, Special Grade, Curse Technique, Mythical Beast Amber. Skills, Reverse Curse Technique, Adaptive Evolution Evaluation, the special grade among special grades. Your cursed energy even reached the level of a 20-finger Sukuna. You are capable of ensuring Sukuna never forgets you for the rest of his life. After yet another cursed energy boost from the system, Rinji's cursed energy successfully reached the level of a 20-finger Sukuna. However, compared to his cursed energy, he was far more curious about his newly acquired skill. Skill, Adaptive Evolution Description. This allows the user to spontaneously analyze, adapt, and develop permanent countermeasures against any phenomenon or curse technique after experiencing it. Note, the experience and mechanics gained through this skill belong entirely to the individual and will not disappear upon the conclusion of a challenge. 350 horsepower equals 1 Chapter 73, Chapter 73, 13th Challenge 1294 words. After seeing the description of the skill, the slight dissatisfaction in Rinji's heart vanished instantly. As expected of Maharaga, the effect is actually this amazing. This is too good as long as I don't get one shot. After the rewards were distributed, Rinji began to reflect on the last challenge. What's lacking from the last challenge? I could tell that our plan was good. Is it because of the absence of Gojo Satoru? Thinking of this, Rinji yelled directly at the system. System, I want to start a new challenge. Understood. The 13th challenge begins. Good luck, host. The white light, the feeling of weightlessness, flying, the familiar process happened all over again. Rinji quickly opened his eyes and scanned the area below, and a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes once he saw clearly. This particular respawn point was deeply engraved in Rinji's memory because it was the very first time he had successfully landed. He managed to avoid dying immediately upon landing for the first time, during his 10th challenge simply because he landed in the sea. The only tragic part was that he had been completely ambushed by a sneaky coward back then. As a result, even though he finally managed to land after so much effort, Rinji died before he could even explore a single thing. He let out a sinister chuckle. You coward, I forgot to track you down for revenge after beating Kashimo last time. Without the slightest bit of fear, Rinji even channeled his cursed energy directly to accelerate his charge toward the surface of the sea. Having already fought a match against Sukuna, Rinji harbored absolutely no fear toward this kind of nameless jujitsu sorcerer in a corner. The distance of dozens of meters between the respawn point and the sea level was crossed by Rinji in an instant. Just as he was about to plunge into the water, a flash of electricity sparked in Rinji's eyes, and a massive amount of cursed energy suddenly gathered in his palm. The cursed energy underwent a change in properties under the effect of his technique, transforming into raging electricity. The next moment, the orb of electricity condensed in Rinji's palm detonated, sending a small shockwave out from the center of the blast. By utilizing the propulsion of the shockwave, Rinji's body was sent flying forward directly, and he looked right over the sea level as he rushed toward the shore. As his palm touched the ground, Rinji used the momentum to flip over, and his body landed steadily on the ground. He shook his hand and his palm turned red because of the explosion, which was healed instantly under the repair of his RCT. Ever since he fought a battle with Sukuna, Renji's precision in controlling cursed energy indeed moved up a level. He's also close to manipulating it down to an atomic level. He could now easily pull off a spontaneous maneuver like using an explosion to force a direction change in midair. Overall, Renji was quite satisfied with his movement, even if it hurt him in the process. Just as Renji was getting lost in his own smooth movement, a familiar voice echoed from behind a shipping container. "Are you okay?" Renji looked up toward the voice, and that familiar man in a suit appeared once again. After the man in the suit walked out, he delivered the exact same lines as last time. "Do you know what happened? I was working today, and suddenly a lot of people just vanished into thin air. Where did everyone go?" The only slight difference this time around was that as the man in the suit spoke, the panic in his eyes was visibly much more genuine. It was probably because Renji's explosive landing just now was so loud that it accidentally startled him. Renji didn't even bother replying to the man's words, and just kept staring at him. The man in the suit felt his hair stand up on his neck from the stare, and he spoke in a panic. "Why are you looking at me like that?" The corners of Renji's mouth curled up slightly, revealing a malicious smile. In the next instant, his hand shot upward without warning, catching and crushing a white flash of light that had flown in from his peripheral vision. The sudden turn of events gave the man in the suit a massive fright. He seemingly did not expect that Renji actually blocked this attack. "Not a bad reaction. You actually managed to block that." An arrogant voice echoed from a shipping container in the distance. Along with the voice came a short man. After the man came out, he turned his head and glared at the man in the suit. "Trash, you can't even handle a simple task like drawing someone's attention." The man in the suit turned pale and explained in a panic, "And no, that's not it. I really tried my best, I just..." Renji raised his hand and waved it dismissively, cutting off the man in the suit. He looked at the sneaky coward and said in a casual tone, "Why don't you tell me the reason? I will try to give you mercy." The man's face instantly darkened. He glared at Renji and roared, "Presumptuous! Do you know who I am? I am an ancient jujitsu sorcerer resurrected through incarnation. How dare you speak to me like that?" Renji blinked, and the expression on his face turned a bit subtle. He stared at the man intently for a few seconds. After double-checking several times, he finally spoke. "I'm sorry," Renji said very seriously, not sounding like he was joking at all. "Can a sorcerer as weak as you actually get reincarnated by Kenjaku?" The air fell completely silent instantly, and the expression on the man's face froze. He obviously didn't expect to receive such a response. "What did you say?" "I said you're really weak. Is Kenjaku that free? Does he just sign contracts with just any random nobody he finds?" The man's face went completely black, and he let out a furious roar. "You brat." After he finished speaking, he prepared to attack once more, intending to give this ignorant fellow in front of him a reality check. However, while his speed was fast, someone else was faster. Accompanied by a flash of electricity, Renji's body vanished from the spot. The man only felt someone tap the top of his head, followed by a voice echoing from right behind him. "Omi wa mao shindiru." The man's eyes widened, and his mouth opened to say something. The moment the words left his mouth, an explosion erupted from his head, and his head blew into pieces the next instant. The man in the suit collapsed onto the ground in sheer terror, completely unable to understand what had just happened. Renji could now also separate his lightning trait cursed energy into positive and negative electrical charges. By applying the positive charge to the enemy, and letting the positive and negative charges react with each other, he could pull or strike his opponents with an unavoidable hit. In the last challenge, Renji had witnessed Kashimo's positive and negative charge explosion technique firsthand. He just now suddenly realized that lightning trait cursed energy could actually be manipulated to separate charges. After a brief thought, Renji adapted. Furthermore, Renji even unlocked an extra method to apply both the positive and negative charges to the enemy's body simultaneously. When the two charges were injected at the same time, they would rapidly react with one another, triggering a violent explosion. This was the exact reason why the man's head had exploded into pieces. 350 horsepower equals 1 Chapter 74. Chapter 74. The false special grade 1182 words. Renji didn't even bother to look back because real men never look back at explosions. After casually shaking off the residual electricity on his right hand, he walked straight out of the shipping containers. As for that man in the suit, Renji chose to leave him to his own. After all, he wasn't some bloodthirsty maniac, and there was no need to force a kill on an ordinary salaryman who had just been coerced into it. Leaving the shipping containers, Renji leaped onto a tall building and began to confirm his location. Before the last challenge even ended, he already set 2 goals for himself. Firstly, learn anti-domain techniques like hollow wicker basket or simple domain to counter an enemy's domain expansion. Secondly, based on the foundations of the first one, try his best to construct his own domain and learn domain expansion. To achieve the first one, the most suitable mentor in the Tokyo No. 2 colony was, naturally, God of Lightning Hajime Kashimo. Through his previous 2 experiences dealing with him, Renji understood Kashimo's temperament fairly well. That man was a pure battle maniac who wanted nothing more than a hearty, thrilling fight. After the last challenge, Renji had some doubts about whether he could actually learn hollow wicker basket. I should be able to learn it, right? After all, I have adaptive evolution. As long as I am a bit careful this time, and don't accidentally kill him to death with a punch, I will definitely be able to learn hollow wicker basket. After he confirmed the location of the mall, the electricity trait cursed energy trait inside Renji's body activated, and he rushed quickly toward the direction of the mall. Kashimo was once again muttering to himself about Sukuna's whereabouts. Having been sealed away in silence for 400 years, he didn't come here to fight average battles against ordinary jujitsu sorcerers. Sukuna was the only one who could satisfy what he wanted, or at least, that was what Kashimo was thinking just a single second ago. In the very next second, Kashimo's expression suddenly froze. A terrifying sense of pressure swept over from the distance. Kashimo was entirely sure that an unbelievably powerful sorcerer had just appeared. He leaped out of the mall instantly and stared straight in the direction of the source of the cursed energy. Even though he didn't even see the person yet, Kashimo felt like he could barely breathe. Under this monstrous pressure, the burning lust for battle that had been dormant inside him for 400 years was actually being suppressed. What level of cursed energy is this? As the strongest sorcerer from 400 years ago, Kashimo witnessed countless jujitsu sorcerers, but he never saw this level of cursed energy before. An absurd thought flashed through Kashimo's mind. Could it be? I've run into Sukuna. The moment that thought crossed his mind, his body instinctively began to channel cursed energy. The electricity crackled and danced across his skin as Kashimo sank into a low stance, dropping his center of gravity to enter a full combat stance. After a few moments, a figure descended from the sky, crashing heavily right in front of Kashimo amid a burst of lightning. The person who arrived was none other than the strongest modern god of lightning, Renji Kuratsuki. To get Kashimo's attention as quickly as possible, Renji deliberately unleashed his suppressed cursed energy, allowing it to completely flood the entire Tokyo No. Looking at it now, the effect was quite good, as Kashimo came out to meet him directly. Kashimo stared grimly at him. Who are you? Renji let out a giggle and lowered his head somewhat modestly. Oh, I'm just a perfectly ordinary grade 1 jujitsu sorcerer. The entire world seemed to go silent. A grade 1 sorcerer? What kind of a joke was that? Kashimo lived for so long and killed several special grade jujitsu sorcerers, yet not a single person ever brought him the kind of pressure that Renji did. If you are a grade 1 jujitsu sorcerer, then what am I? A grade 2. But regarding his opinion, Renji actually had his own reasons. Even though the system had evaluated him as a special grade, what kind of special grade sorcerer doesn't know how to use domain expansion? Renji was honestly too embarrassed to call himself a special grade. He looked helplessly at Kashimo and waved his hand dismissively. There is nothing I can do about it. I cannot expand domain expansion, so naturally, I considered myself a grade 1 jujitsu sorcerer. You can't use domain expansion. Kashimo frowned instinctively. Who says you can't be a special grade without a domain? That makes zero sense. In Kashimo's era, the construction of a domain didn't necessarily mean aiming for a lethal, sure-kill effect. Therefore, to him, domain expansion was never the absolute baseline for a special grade sorcerer. Even without expanding a domain, it didn't change the fact that he was the strongest sorcerer from 400 years ago. This was why Kashimo was confused. After a few moments, Renji continued to speak to him. Have you ever seen a special grade sorcerer who couldn't use domain expansion? Before Kashimo could reply, Renji answered his own question, you haven't, right? Kashimo honestly couldn't argue with that. The few special grade sorcerers and special grade cursed spirits he had encountered in his era did, in fact, seem capable of domain expansion. Is domain expansion a standard feature for special grade jujitsu sorcerers? It absolutely is. The next moment, Renji pointed at the air somewhat angrily. Look at those sorcerers in the jujitsu world nowadays. They learn a technique like hollow wicker basket, block a domain just once by pure chance, and suddenly dare to call themselves special grades. Aren't they a fraud? If you're like a weaker sorcerer, look up to these frauds, copy them, and think you're ready to fight a real special grade enemy. You are going to get absolutely crushed and die. Am I right? Renji looked at Kashimo with deep sincerity. When it comes to special grade sorcerers, you have to look for domain expansion. To those jujitsu sorcerers who claim hollow wicker basket makes you a special grade, I want to ask, have you ever seen a real special grade jujitsu sorcerer, you idiot? Get the hell out of here. Renji's voice echoed through the air. Kashimo could feel how much disdain Renji held in his heart for those jujitsu sorcerers who lacked a domain yet called themselves special grade. Suddenly, Renji snapped his head back toward him and asked with a face full of curiosity. Oh, by the way, dare I ask, are you a special grade sorcerer? The atmosphere suddenly grew a bit tense. Kashimo, who was usually blunt and straight to the point, fell into a rare silence, and the sound of his heavy breathing became noticeable in the air. After a long pause, Kashimo took a deep breath and said in a low voice. I believe I am. 700 horsepower equals 1 Chapter 75, Chapter 75, Interruption 1100 words. Then dare I ask, if you also happen to know how to expand a dom? Renji looked at Kashimo with a face full of curiosity. However, before he could finish his sentence, Kashimo raised a hand to cut him off. Don't ask. I have no desire to answer that question. All right, fair enough. Seeing Kashimo dodging the question again, Renji scratched his head and stopped trolling. After a few moments, the atmosphere grew heavy as both of them surged with cursed energy simultaneously. Renji clearly didn't unleash his cursed energy and come all the way here just to invite him out for a meal. Similarly, Kashimo hadn't let go of his staff since the very beginning. Given the current situation, it was going to be hard to wrap things up without a fight. However, just as the tension reached its absolute boiling point, a slightly disappointed voice interrupted. So it's not the Fallen. Following the sound of the voice, a young girl with wings on her back and a mouth on her face was currently flying in the sky. At the very first glance, Renji recognized her. It was Angel Hana Kurusu. During the last challenge, Renji had a brief encounter with her in Tokyo Colony No. However, last time she had only shown up after his fight with Kashimo was already over. This time, Angel was way ahead of schedule. Renji thought about it and immediately guessed the reason. It was probably because he had unleashed his cursed energy right from the start, catching the attention of Angel from afar and causing her to arrive early. Angel stared down at Renji with a grim expression. Not long ago, she had sensed a terrifying oppressive cursed energy. She only ever felt this level of cursed energy from the fallen, Sukuna. The reason why Angel agreed to Kenjaku's request to undergo incarnation was largely to completely purify Sukuna, the king of curses. After she discovered that Sukuna might have appeared, Angel rushed over immediately. To her disappointment, Sukuna wasn't here, and the person who appeared before her eyes was a jujitsu sorcerer she had never seen before. She didn't expect that someone in the world actually possessed cursed energy that could rival Sukuna's. On the other hand, Kashimo saw that Angel, who had suddenly joined the battlefield, kept staring intently at Renji without casting even a single glance in his direction, and his composure instantly broke down. Kashimo's mental state instantly broke. "You look at me at least once, god damn it. What the hell are you looking at? Who do you think you are?" Angel finally looked at Kashimo, but it was a mere glance before she immediately turned her head back to Renji. "I am called Angel, and this person is Hana Kurusu. May I ask what you are called?" "I'm not called anything, I didn't even yell." Renji flusteredly looked left and right, completely missing her meaning since he had been perfectly quiet just now. The air fell silent for a moment. Angel took a deep breath. "I asked what your name is." Renji nodded in realization and hurriedly introduced himself. "I'm Renji Kuratsuki. You can call me Renji." Seizing the opportunity, Kashimo chimed in from the side. "I am also Kashimo Hajime." Angel gave a nonchalant nod, signaling that she heard him. The next second, Angel stared back at Renji and asked with a somewhat tense expression, "Are you an ancient sorcerer who reincarnated through a vessel?" The reason why Angel signed a contract with Kenjaku, aside from wanting to destroy Sukuna, was to send all incarnated and resurrected jujitsu sorcerers to heaven. Renji shook his head. "I am not. I am a pure-born and raised modern jujitsu sorcerer." "Phew, that's a relief." Angel visibly breathed a sigh of relief, and the tension on her face vanished. Right at that moment, Kashimo suddenly blurted out coldly, "I am an ancient sorcerer who reincarnated through a vessel. Is that so?" Angel nodded casually, as if she had just heard a completely insignificant piece of information. Kashimo could no longer endure it. He pointed a finger at Angel and roared, "You're taking this too far. I've tolerated you for long enough." He turned his head to look at Renji. "Hold on a minute with our business. Let me handle this bastard first." "Don't worry, it won't take up too much of your time." At this moment, Kashimo was completely triggered and throwing a tantrum. After seeing this, Renji flashed forward, quickly grabbing Kashimo to pull him back. Forget it, forget it. She's just a kid who doesn't know any better, she's just playing around. No need to get worked up." Angel was currently the only means to unseal Gojo Satoru. He didn't pay attention during the last challenge, and let her get killed by Sukuna, which resulted in him having to be the very first one to fight Sukuna. This time, Renji couldn't afford to repeat that mistake. He had to ensure Angel survived to let Gojo Satoru out. Angel flew in the sky, looking at Kashimo with complete indifference. As someone who lived 1,000 years ago, she really didn't know much about Kashimo, a mere jujitsu sorcerer from 400 years ago. Suddenly, a column of thunderous light shot into the sky and erupted on the field below. The person who released the thunderous light was none other than Kashimo, who was still being held back by Renji. Seeing Renji stopping him, Kashimo stopped holding back entirely and blasted his cursed energy trait straight at him. Renji, who was struck, let go of Kashimo, and his entire body used the momentum to retreat backward. He looked at Kashimo in annoyance. Hey, hey, hey. What's with the sneak attack? I utterly despise you." Kashimo completely ignored him. The only thing that surprised Kashimo was that Renji clearly took a blast of his lightning strike head-on. Aside from some damage to his clothes, Renji's body suffered no injuries at all. Seeing Kashimo's bewildered expression, Renji raised his hand, and the cursed energy of electricity danced across his palm. Haha, look at that, isn't this a coincidence? I have the same cursed energy electricity like you. Furthermore, I can absorb electricity, so your shocks have no effect on me. After hearing these words, Kashimo Hajime instantly grew solemn. He didn't expect that the person in front of him not only possessed a more massive amount of cursed energy than he did, but even his cursed energy trait countered him. 700 horsepower equals 1 Chapter 76, Chapter 76, Alliance, Bonus, 1167 words 1 hour later. The shopping mall lay entirely in ruins across the area. Right in the center of the debris, Kashimo Hajime, the strongest jujitsu sorcerer from 400 years ago, was lying on the ground covered in wounds. After a thrilling and incredibly cautious fight, Renji finally succeeded in defeating his opponent, while making sure he didn't accidentally kill him. There was nothing that could be done about it. Kashimo couldn't match him in cursed energy, his speed couldn't keep up, and even his technique, the positive and negative charge explosion, was useless against Renji. To make matters worse, Renji could use the RCT to heal himself. Kashimo actually managed to land a proper blow, but the damage was healed instantly. At this moment, Angel, Hana Kurusu, who was flying in the sky, arrived behind Renji. She looked down at the helpless Kashimo on the ground and asked, "Aren't you going to kill him to take his points?" Renji scratched his head awkwardly. "There's no need, right? I've already got 5 points, so I don't really have a reason to collect more. Besides, I still have some business with Kashimo here." Angel nodded in sudden realization. "Ah, so that's why you were holding back the entire time." As an old-timer from the absolute golden age of the jiu-jitsu world 1,000 years ago, Angel possessed vast combat experience. She could tell at a single glance that Renji hadn't been fighting at full strength. Moreover, she wasn't the only one who noticed. Kashimo, lying on the ground, used the last ounce of his strength to turn his head away. As a jujitsu sorcerer, he could accept his own defeat, and he could accept his own death. What he absolutely could not accept was someone holding back against him in battle. This made Kashimo, who prided himself on being strong, feel a deep sense of self-doubt. Is it true that a jujitsu sorcerer without a domain expansion really can't be considered special grade? It turns out I am nothing more than a grade 1 jujitsu sorcerer born in an era without special grade jujitsu sorcerers. The sorcerers of this era are way too strong. To think they are this much stronger than 400 years ago. Hana Kurusu looked at Renji with a hint of admiration, and she spoke out of curiosity. "Does a jujitsu sorcerer as strong as you still need to look for someone to help you?" Angel was different from the other ancient sorcerers who had reincarnated. Instead of killing her vessel, she chose a path of coexistence, residing inside Hana Kurusu's body. Unlike the ancient entity Angel, Hana herself was still just a normal young girl. He waved his hand dismissively and tilted his head up to look at the sky. "I actually still have many shortcomings. In terms of domain expansion, I have a long way to go. I came here today precisely to seek guidance from Kashimo." Hana Kurusu looked down at Kashimo. After hearing Renko say he wanted to seek guidance regarding domains, Kashimo turned his head back over in confusion. "Why are you looking for me to consult about domains? I don't know how to expand either." Renji didn't notice Kashimo's expression, and he looked at Angel on the side. "Hey, Angel, you're trying to find Sukuna, right?" The fallen Angel kept talking about was the exact same person as Sukuna. Listening to Renji's words, Angel froze for a moment and then nodded. "That is correct. An evil person like the fallen should not continue to exist in this world. He must be purified." Renji clapped his hands together loudly. What a coincidence. He pointed at Angel, Kashimo on the ground, and himself one after another. "You were resurrected to eliminate Sukuna. Kashimo here was resurrected to fight Sukuna to the death, and I also want to have a massive battle with Sukuna. Angel, haven't you noticed? The three of us have the exact same goal." Angel thought of something and looked at Renji tentatively. "You want me and this guy to follow you? What do you mean by follow me?" Renji waved his hand and corrected her. "The three of us are cooperating. Do you understand cooperation? I'm sure the various barriers in these current colonies must be causing you quite a bit of trouble, Angel-san." I hope you will cooperate well with me. I certainly won't let you suffer a loss. What do you say? Angel stared at him in silence with doubts. After she temporarily suppressed the doubts in her heart, Angel began to ponder the cooperation Renji mentioned. It would increase her chances of purifying the fallen when teaming up with a sorcerer as monstrously powerful as Renji. No matter how she looked at it, there was no reason for her to refuse. Seeing that Angel looked swayed, Renji hurriedly struck while the iron was hot. If you don't cooperate with me, you might never get the chance to purify Sukuna. Angel, you wouldn't want Sukuna to continue harming the human world, right? Bwahahaha. Angel didn't understand modern society very well, but Hana Kurusu, being a young girl of the modern era, understood it all too well. Hana Kurusu's face flushed as she looked at Renji, and waved her hands repeatedly. Oh, stop saying such weird things. Angel was briefly puzzled by Hana's reaction, but her obsession with purifying Sukuna quickly overcame everything else. If your goal is also the fallen, I can cooperate with you. Excellent. Renji's face lit up with joy. The plan in the last challenge was still a bit impulsive. He shouldn't have gone to stop Sukuna, instead, he should have directly found a way to find Angel. If he had dragged Gojo Satoru along to lie in ambush on the exact day Sukuna wanted to take over Megumi's body, Gojo Satoru could have dealt with Sukuna even if Sukuna resurrected directly, let alone within 1 minute. If Kenjaku dared to crawl out of his hole to cause trouble, it would be a total failure if Gojo didn't beat him to death within 3 minutes. While hunting for Kashimo, Renji had already set his ultimate goal. In this challenge, Renji wanted to perform a speed run and wait for Sukuna to transfer his soul to Yuji's pinky finger and destroy the finger containing his soul. This required cooperation with Angel, which was the very first step to achieving this goal. Renji looked at Angel and shouted excitedly, "Then it's a deal. The three of us will form a mini-alliance next, and our goal is to take out Sukuna." The scene instantly filled with a joyful atmosphere. The only glaring issue was Hajime Kashimo, who was still lying on the ground. He stared blankly at Renji, who was casually making decisions on his behalf. What the hell do you mean by the three of us? Did I ever agree to join your little alliance? 700 horsepower equals 1 Chapter 77, Chapter 77, Deadlock 1371 words after some gentle persuasion from Renji and Angel, Hajime agreed to join their alliance. After a few moments, Kashimo, who recovered his cursed energy, sat up and looked at Renji. By the way, what's your plan? Since you proposed an alliance, you must have a plan, right? Regarding this question, Renji already had an initial plan in his mind. In order to prevent a butterfly effect, Renji decided not to make contact with Yuji Itadori just yet. During these few days, he would first look for some strong opponents to fight, and see if he could learn domain expansion. Meanwhile, Renji would secretly take Angel to Jujutsu High to break Satoru Gojo's seal. Simultaneously, he would have Gojo hide first and catch Sukuna off guard. Once the timing was right, Renji would approach Yuji and stay by his side, waiting to strike and block Sukuna again the moment he shouted in chain. During that 1 minute, Renji would completely suppress Sukuna, and try his best to defeat him without relying on Gojo Satoru. Perhaps during the final calculation, the system would judge that he was the one who defeated Sukuna. When Uram and Kenjaku finally showed up, Gojo Satoru could step in and finish Kenjaku off. By then, they could even recover the 3 fingers of Sukuna that Uram carried. Finally, Angel would step up and use Jacob's ladder to completely destroy Sukuna's fingers, sending Sukuna straight into the cycle of reincarnation once and for all. The overall plan was absolutely perfect, and Renji couldn't think of any possibility of failure. He patted his chest confidently and said, "Don't worry about the plan. I already have a whole plan to eliminate Sukuna right now." "What is it?" Angel looked at him with an excited face. "Let me keep it a secret for now," Renji said mysteriously. A lot of the information in his plan came from the manga, so it wasn't easy to explain it to them directly. Seeing the doubt in Angel's eyes, Renji looked at her solemnly and said, "Angel-san, to prevent the plan from leaking, I won't tell you for now. I'm sure you wouldn't want to fail to purify Sukuna because the plan got leaked, right? After a long pause, Angel finally nodded. I understand. As long as Sukuna could be purified, she could afford not to ask too much about the details for now. Pushing her suspicions to the back of her mind, Angel opened her mouth and looked at him. Then what do you need me to do? Since you want an alliance, you must have something you want me to do, right? I certainly need you to do a small favor. Renji grinned, rubbing his hands together like a fly. I need your help to undo the seal on the special grade cursed object Prison Realm. A jujitsu sorcerer named Gojo Satoru was sealed inside it. Hearing the words Prison Realm, a look of realization flashed across Angel's face. The Prison Realm was passed down for 1,000 years in the jujitsu world, and it was a special grade cursed object that already existed back when Angel was still alive. Once someone was sealed by the Prison Realm, it was basically impossible to get out. However, Angel's innate technique, Jacob's Ladder, just so happened to be one of the ways to break the seal. Angel looked at him with a calm expression. No problem. I can help you undo the seal of the Prison Realm. That's amazing. Don't celebrate too early. I have one condition. Renji, who was right in the middle of his excitement, waved it off carelessly. No problem. Forget about one condition, even 10 would be fine. Just one is enough. I don't have many demands. Angel spoke with an expressionless, as long as you help me purify the fallen, I will help you undo the seal of the Prison Realm. Sure, I'll help you right in, Renji nodded reflexively, but stopped halfway through his sentence as his brain finally registered what she said. He looked at Angel in utter bewilderment. If you help me unseal the Prison Realm first, then I can guarantee I'll help you purify Sukuna. Angel shook her head. If you don't help me purify the fallen first, how can I help you undo the Prison Realm's seal? That is exactly why I came to find you to save Gojo Satoru. But I need you to purify the fallen first. How can we purify Sukuna without Gojo? Then go find Gojo Satoru first. I literally came here to find you so you could unseal the Prison Realm and save Gojo Satoru. Seeing that Angel was about to speak again, Renji raised his hand to cut her off. How did we end up stuck in a dead end? Let us start over. He stared at Angel. Why do you completely insist that I help you purify Sukuna first? Why can't you just undo the seal first? Angel looked at him as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, and asked a question he couldn't answer. How do I know you haven't been lying to me from the very beginning just to get me to unseal the Prison Realm for you? You keep saying you can kill Sukuna, but in the end, you won't even tell me your plan. That shows you don't trust me. Since you don't trust me, how can I trust you? Renji scratched his head awkwardly. What Angel said actually makes perfect sense. If this happened to me, I would be suspicious too. Angel wasn't the only one thinking this way, and Kashimo, standing to the side, was also on guard against Renji's sudden appearance. Renji took a deep breath, and he remembered the challenge where Sukuna took over Megumi's body in his mind. That time, because he revealed too much information, Renji caused Sukuna to change his plans on the spot. But if I can control the spread of information, the probability of a butterfly effect happening shouldn't be very high, right? After weighing his options, Renji looked at Angel and Kashimo. Since you want to know so badly, I'll tell you. But you have to promise that you'll follow my orders in the upcoming plan. Angel and Kashimo exchanged a glance, then both nodded. Angel said firmly, no problem. As long as your plans are good, I will absolutely follow your orders. You better really be able to control yourself. Shaking his head, Renji explained Sukuna's in-chain binding vow and his intention to seize the opportunity to switch bodies. He also gave a brief summary of his plan to launch a surprise attack during the body swap. Renji looked at Angel. Do you understand now? Gojo Satoru is our insurance policy to guarantee the sneak attack goes safely. As long as he is around, the moment Sukuna dares to come out, he's a dead man. Angel fell into deep thought upon hearing those words. Even though she preferred to just locate the kid named Itadori, blast him with a Jacob's ladder regardless of the cost, and send Sukuna straight to heaven, she ultimately nodded after considering Renji's strength. All right, I have no objections. We'll go with your plan. After things were settled with Angel, a new issue arose on Kashimo Hajime's side. If you just purify Sukuna directly, how am I supposed to fight him? Renji looked at Kashimo helplessly. How about I swap him for a different opponent? Gojo Satoru is known as the strongest modern jujitsu sorcerer. He can definitely satisfy your craving for a good fight. Kashimo hesitated instantly. The sole purpose of his resurrection was Sukuna, and being handed a substitute opponent made him want to refuse instinctively. However, right at this moment, Renji suddenly advised him in a low voice. You even struggled to fight me, so there is no need to fixate on Sukuna, right? Why don't we consider switching to someone else? You wouldn't want Sukuna to instantly kill you with a single slash when the time comes. It would be a total embarrassment for you, don't you agree? 1100 horsepower equals 1 chapter 78, chapter 78, nah, I'd lose. Hajime Kashimo took a deep breath. Why do all of you speak with such hostility? I think communication between people should have a bit of kindness, right? Kashimo wanted to say something, but remembering the intense battle that had just occurred, he looked back at Renji and asked a question instead. Who is stronger, Gojo Satoru or you? Renji raised his head in thought, pondering for a moment. If Gojo Satoru is at full condition, it might be a bit tricky. Would you win? Nah, I'd lose. Renji's crisp and straightforward answer instantly crushed the sliver of hope that had just risen in Kashimo's heart. He didn't know how strong Gojo Satoru, the strongest modern jujitsu sorcerer, actually was, but if Renji could win against Gojo Satoru, wouldn't that mean Kashimo's own strength wasn't actually that bad? He just happened to run into the strongest person, Renji, making his own defeat understandable. But all of that vanished the moment Renji admitted he couldn't beat Gojo Satoru. It looks like I really am just an ordinary jujitsu sorcerer born in an era without special-grade jujitsu sorcerers. Seeing Kashimo suddenly plunge into despair, Renji felt a bit puzzled. What's wrong now? Why did he suddenly stop talking? Angel, on the other hand, vaguely guessed what was going on. However, she couldn't care less about anything unrelated to Sukuna, and she chose to retreat directly back into Hana Kurusu's body. Hana Kurusu rolled her eyes left and right, then spoke up with a suggestion. It's already noon, how about we eat first? That works too. Renji nodded, looking at the sun in the sky. It really is lunchtime. They eventually found a small restaurant in the colony, where they prepared to discuss their next actions over dinner. After finishing their meal, Kashimo suddenly looked at Renji. Renji, you said earlier that you wanted to consult me about domains. But I must say beforehand, I don't know how to do that domain stuff either. No problem, I know you can't use domain expansion. Renji waved his hand casually, speaking nonchalantly. Kashimo's face froze. He recalled that when he first met him, Renji had said right to his face that special-grade jujitsu sorcerers who couldn't use domain expansion were just idiots who had never seen a real special grade before. Afterward, Renji had even asked him if he was a special-grade sorcerer. This meant that the pile of nonsense this bastard said back then was intentionally meant for him to mock him. Looking at Kashimo, who had suddenly taken a deep breath, Renji still didn't understand what was happening. What's wrong? You don't look so good. It's nothing. Since you already know I can't use domain expansion, what exactly did you want to consult me about? Renji wasn't sure if it was just his imagination, but he couldn't help but feel that Kashimo was practically speaking through gritted teeth. Shaking his head, Renji tossed the strange thought out of his mind and officially stated his purpose. I don't have a domain yet, so I want to learn Hollow Wicker Basket from you. Hollow Wicker Basket. After confirming he didn't misheard, Kashimo looked at him in utter disbelief. He didn't expect a powerful like him to not even know a technique as simple as Hollow Wicker Basket. That shouldn't be possible, right? He looked at Rinji in confusion. Did the person who taught you jujitsu back then not have similar anti-domain technique? Hollow wicker basket that could neutralize a sure hit effect inside an enemy's domain was not rare. Logically speaking, there was no reason for Rinji to go out of his way to learn it from him. Rinji gave an embarrassed smile. To be completely honest with you, I'm self-taught. I've never had a teacher. Kashimo slowly nodded. Rinji-kun, your talent is amazing. To think you grew to this level all on your own. Hana looked at him with deep admiration, suddenly asking out of curiosity, then how long have you been a jujitsu sorcerer, Rinji-kun? Oh, it's nothing, just ordinary human level. Rinji first waved his hands humbly, then tilted his head to calculate. If I have to be exact, I've been a jujitsu sorcerer for about 22 days. Even though this current challenge was only on its first day, Rinji had spent 21 days in his previous challenge. So it's been 22 years. Kashimo nodded, but the next moment, he turned his head up. You said how long? Just now, Kashimo had automatically assumed Rinji meant 22 years. Strictly speaking, it hasn't even been 22 days yet. If I count this morning, it should still fall short by a few hours. Rinji's second confirmation made Kashimo's vision go dark, and he nearly fainted right then and there. He absolutely couldn't accept that he had been defeated by a guy who hadn't even been a jujitsu sorcerer for a month. Even Angel manifested on Hana's face once more, staring at him in disbelief. Seeing their reactions, Rinji shrugged his shoulders in confusion. It's not really that exaggerated, right? I feel pretty ordinary. I haven't even learned domain expansion after 22 days. There's a man named Hiromi Higuruma in the Tokyo No. 1 colony became a grade 1 sorcerer in just 12 days. Afterward, it took him a little over 20 days to learn a domain and promote to a special grade. His talent is way more impressive than mine. Kashimo, who had just barely regained consciousness, heard Rinji say that someone else had become a special grade in less than 20 days. Kashimo's eyes went dark once again, and he completely collapsed onto the sofa. 1,100 horsepower equals 1 chapter. Chapter 79, Chapter 79, Flaws 12-14 words. After a long period of psychological adjustment, Kashimo finally accepted the fact that he was not the strongest. He looked toward Rinji. Hollow wicker basket is an old technique from 1,000 years ago. If you don't mind it being outdated, I can teach you. How could I? Of course I don't mind. Rinji quickly replied. Since you don't mind, I'll give you a demonstration right now. Kashimo Hajime sat on a chair, looking with an exhausted gaze at Rinji, who was still fumbling with his cursed energy up ahead. Hana Kurusu cautiously approached his side. Why don't we have dinner first? We can practice again after we finish eating. Kashimo took a deep breath, turned to Hana with bloodshot eyes, and asked, why is it that he just cannot learn it? Hana Kurusu was startled, and she stammered her guess. That. I'm not really sure either. Kashimo didn't understand. He truly did not understand. In his era, the hollow wicker basket was a life-saving technique that any jujitsu sorcerers could learn. Just then, Rinji's voice came over, his tone filled with absolute sincerity. Kashimo, why don't you demonstrate it to me one more time? I promise I'll get it this time. Kashimo looked at him in silence, and he asked with a trembling voice. Are you messing with me, or is this for real? Why on earth can't you learn it? It's not like I want to fail. It's probably just a lack of talent. Rinji scratched his head awkwardly. After he officially practiced the hollow wicker basket, he discovered that his skill, adaptive evolution, had a very serious flaw. That flaw was that adaptive evolution was only for an offensive attack that could cause him physical harm. He had to experience the sure hit, or sure kill effect of the domain before he could learn an anti-domain technique. As for techniques like the hollow wicker basket, Rinji couldn't adapt to it. Relying purely on his own talent, his learning progress for the hollow wicker basket was extremely slow. Even though it wasn't completely unlearnable, Renji felt that it would be somewhat difficult for him to fully master it before Sukuna got out. Kashimo sighed helplessly. Even though he looked very exhausted, he still felt a tiny delight in his heart when he saw that Renji didn't instantly learn the hollow wicker basket. This meant Renji's talent wasn't as terrifyingly high as he thought, and the gap between them wasn't completely big. After they paused the training, Angel woke up from inside Hana Kurusu's body. Angel looked at Renji and said, "Renji, what is your plan for the next few days? Are you just going to learn the hollow wicker basket?" "Well, not necessarily," Renji denied awkwardly. He already had a follow-up plan, but because he thought he could finish learning the hollow wicker basket very quickly before noon today, he didn't mention it for the time being. Since he couldn't learn it in a short period of time, there was no rush anymore. He looked at Angel and explained, "I plan to gather some points first to add 2 new rules to the culling game. In order to prevent this challenge from having the same butterfly effect as the last challenge, Renji prepared to add the rule to disclose players' points and locations, which Kashimo added in the original timeline. He also needed to add an extra rule that players can freely enter and exit the colony to contact Yuji ahead of time." As she listened to Renji's explanation, Angel suddenly spoke up, "There is no need to rush the second rule. It will be fine as long as we add the first one." Renji looked at her in confusion. "Angel, the second rule is actually the urgent one. If we don't have this rule, we can't get out of the barrier at all." "Who said we can't leave?" Under Renji's puzzled gaze, Angel explained, "My curse technique can nullify other cursed techniques, and that includes the barriers of the culling game. As long as you all stay within a certain range of me, I can take you straight out." Renji's mind went blank for a second before he looked at Angel with excitement. "Holy crap, that's amazing." Hana Kurusu proudly put her hands on her hips and nodded. Angel looked back at him. "So should we stay in the Tokyo colony now? 2 foot for the next few days and wait for the right moment you mentioned to head out?" Renji's eyes darted around as he thought it over. He thought that he needed to add 2 rules, and he was a bit worried that gathering enough points would be troublesome. But now, since Angel could bring them out of the colony freely, this problem vanished instantly. They only needed to add the rule to disclose player information at the time, and they could ensure that the future would proceed according to the original plot. Moreover, Renji now had other things he could do. Yuji was still clearing out cursed spirits in the outskirts of Tokyo, and wouldn't enter until at least the 12th. These few days happened to allow them to do some other things. He looked at Angel excitedly. "How about you take us out first, Angel? Let's go to the other colonies and find a few powerful sorcerers. We can spar with them and see if we can recruit them to join us as backup." Renji's words piqued the interest of both Angel and Kashimo. Angel asked somewhat hesitantly, "Are they willing to come help deal with the fallen?" Angel's concern was not without reason. Not everyone was willing to deal with Sukuna, especially the ancient jujitsu sorcerers. Moreover, most of them were psychologically unstable, making normal communication quite difficult. However, Renji spoke with total confidence. "I can't speak for the others, but there is definitely one who will be willing to come. I can't say for sure about Takako Yuro, but as long as I tell Ryu Ishigori that we are fighting Sukuna, he will definitely be willing to come and help out." On the other side, Kashimo didn't care whether others came or not. He was just curious about how strong these powerful sorcerers Renji mentioned actually were. "How strong are these sorcerers you're talking about?" After pondering his choice of words, Renji looked at Kashimo. "Pretty strong. And one of them is actually from the exact same era as you." "Who is it?" Kashimo was filled with curiosity. "Ryu Ishigori. You should have heard of him, right?" The scene of his conversation with Kenjaku right before his past death instantly echoed in Kashimo's mind. Back then, Kenjaku told him that there was a powerful sorcerer named Ryu Ishigori in the Mutsu region. It was just that his body could no longer handle the journey to find him at the time, so it was a regret that he never got to fight him. He never expected that this opportunity would actually present itself now. Angel and Kashimo grew interested at this moment, and they asked Renji one after another which colony it was. Without hesitation, Renji blurted out the name he had prepared long ago. 1100 horsepower equals 1 Chapter 80, Chapter 80, Sendai Colony 1144 words in front of the barrier. Angel looked at the black boundary ahead, and asked Renji once more. Do you really not need me to go inside with the two of you? Renji waved his hand and pointed at Kashimo. Just me and Kashimo going in is fine. You can just wait outside the barrier. He didn't know what kind of outcome to expect from this upcoming journey into the Sendai colony. Who knows if some problem might pop up for us inside. During the last challenge, Angel's death had almost caused the final battle against Sukuna to end in failure. To be safe, Renji ultimately decided that only he and Kashimo would enter the Sendai colony. Angel, on the other hand, would wait at the edge of the barrier for them to return. He looked at Angel one last time and said, Angel, just wait for us outside. We will come here at this exact time 3 days from now, and you can open the barrier for us then. If we aren't back by then, go find the people from Jujutsu High. Tell them about the binding vow between Itadori and Sukuna, and let them execute my plan. Angel had no objections to this. She nodded and manifested Jacob's ladder to tear open a hole in the barrier. Right before entering the Sendai colony, Renji suddenly remembered something he had missed and abruptly turned around to give a final warning. By the way, when you look for people, make sure not to find Megumi Fushiguro. That man can't really handle pressure, so make sure he doesn't mess up the plan because of too much pressure when the time comes. Sendai colony. No one knew whether Kenjaku did it on purpose or by accident, but he released several incredibly powerful ancient sorcerers into the Sendai colony as players. He even released the special-grade cursed spirit, Kururushihi, which was originally controlled by Suguru Geto's cursed spirit manipulation. The presence of these powerful sorcerers alongside Kururushi was an absolute nightmare for the ordinary players trapped inside the Sendai colony. On a street inside the barrier, a few ordinary people left behind were running frantically toward the end of the road. Behind them, a black tide surged wildly toward them. However, the tide was not water, and it was a flood from countless, densely packed little cockroaches. The swarms of cockroaches gathered together and rubbed against each other frantically, letting out a rustling sound. Just as the swarm of cockroaches was about to catch up to the fleeing people, the cockroaches suddenly stopped in unison. The cockroach swarm parted down the middle, and a humanoid cursed spirit whose appearance resembled a cockroach walked out from within. It was the controller of this swarm of cockroaches, the special-grade cursed spirit Kururushi. Since the culling game had only just begun, Kururushi hadn't yet entered a dormant state due to Dhruv Lakdawala's technique. Kururushi looked toward a tall building far down the street, and on top of the building, it clearly sensed 2 human figures staring at him. Even though they were far away, Kururushi could tell from their postures that one was crouching and the other was standing. The pressure they exuded was suffocating. On top of the building, Kashimo was crouching, supporting his thigh with one elbow and his knee with the palm of his other hand. Renji stood beside him, looking down at Kururushi from above. Kashimo nodded his head toward Kururushi's direction. Is that the special-grade cursed spirit, Kururushi, you were talking about? That's right. Renji nodded and spoke proudly, the thing down there is the special-grade cursed spirit Kenjaku intentionally released, Kururushi. It doesn't look like much. Kashimo said, pursing his lips. The cursed spirit below didn't seem to possess that much cursed energy, and its technique was just the basic control of a cockroach swarm. A cockroach swarm might be troublesome for ordinary people, but for a sorcerer like him, it was merely a bit disgusting. Whether it was cursed energy or technique, Kururushi gave him the same impression as the so-called special-grade cursed spirits he had encountered 400 years ago. Judging by this, the level of jujitsu sorcerers in the modern era doesn't seem to have changed much compared to my era. Don't underestimate him. Renji said in disdain, do you see that blade in his hand? That's his cursed tool, the festering life sword. The hollow spaces in the blade of the festering life sword contain insect eggs. If you get slashed by it, the eggs will burrow into your body and grow rapidly inside you. Unless you're a sorcerer who has learned the RCT, the cockroaches inside will kill you directly from within your own body. You could say it's extremely dangerous. Renji still held a level of respect for Kururushi and his festering life sword. In the original timeline, even Yuta Okatsu had been struck by the eggs of the festering life sword when he fought Kururushi. In fact, Ryu Ishigori and Takako Yuro, who were watching from the sidelines at the time, had instantly declared the battle over upon seeing that happen. If Yuta didn't know RCT and destroyed Kururushi's eggs directly from the inside out, he might have been taken down right then and there. As he listened to Renji's opinion of Kururushi, Kashimo not only felt no fear, but he actually grew even more excited. Is that so? Now that sounds like a bit of a challenge. He grinned excitedly, standing up as bursts of electrical cursed energy crackled all over his body. Don't interfere just yet. I want to kill this cursed spirit's body all by myself. I really can't do anything about you. Renji held his glasses, shook his head, and laughed helplessly. Even though another goal of his for this challenge was to fight jujitsu sorcerers as much as possible to try and get a curse technique reward at the end, since Kashimo actively said he wanted a fight, it wasn't good for him to intervene by force. Moreover, the system's requirement for a curse technique reward was to defeat jujitsu sorcerers. Kururushi was a cursed spirit, and Renji wasn't even sure if he counted. He let Kashimo have this opponent first. When they later encountered Ryu Ishigori and the others, Kashimo would feel too embarrassed to fight him for them. Furthermore, it wasn't as if Renji would lose his chance to fight Kururushi entirely. Kururushi possessed the technique of parthenogenesis. Even if he was killed once by Kashimo, Kururushi might still resurrect once again in the form of a cursed spirit. Seeing that Renji wouldn't interfere in his fight, Kashimo leaped off the tall building in excitement, charging straight toward Kururushi below. Hey, hey, hey! Don't let me down, Kururushi. 1100 horsepower equals 1 Chapter 81. Chapter 81. Desert 1063 words. The sound of crackling electricity echoed from Kashimo's body, making him look as if he were completely enveloped in lightning. The attack, which carried the light of electricity, smashed heavily onto Kururushi's cockroach swarm, wiping out a massive amount of cockroaches in an instant. Kururushi controlled the cockroach swarm to pull back and open up a distance, and his eyes stared fixedly at this uninvited guest before him. Why are you attacking us? Does there need to be a reason? Then why do you attack humans? Kururushi replied casually. I like the taste of iron, and human blood contains iron. A sharp, mocking smirk carved its way onto Kashimo's face. He rested his Nioi staff lazily against his shoulder, the faint, erratic crackle of electrified cursed energy snapping around his ankles. Then why don't you try tasting the iron in my body? Kururushi's gaze narrowed, and the cockroach swarm that surrounded him immediately became restless, surging toward Kashimo like a tide. Too slow. An excited smile spread across Kashimo's face. He stomped his right foot heavily on the ground, and instead of retreating away, his whole body charged straight toward Kururushi. He rushed directly into the cockroach swarm. Just as Kururushi thought this human had a death wish, a massive burst of lightning erupted from Kashimo's body. The overwhelming electrical discharge exploded through the swarm, instantly frying hundreds of thousands of cockroaches into charcoal. Kururushi's pupils contracted. It felt an unprecedented sense of pressure. In the next instant, Kashimo closed the distance right in front of Kururushi. Raising the staff enveloped in his cursed energy, he swung it brutally toward Kururushi's head. Kururushi raised its left arm to block, but under the sheer force of Kashimo's full-power strike, its body was sent flying backward, plowing a deep trench into the ground. On the tall building, Renji crouched at the edge and watched the battle below. Kashimo looks pretty strong after all. It wasn't obvious when fighting him yesterday, but facing Kururushi, the strength belonging to the strongest jujitsu sorcerer from 400 years ago was fully on display. It's understandable. I'm immune to his cursed energy trait. In a situation like that, it wasn't something that could be overcome just by raw fighting. But now, it was different against Kururushi. Kashimo's lightning curse technique was active again, and he could finally go all out and fight recklessly. Kururushi crawled out from the pile of rubble. It glared fixedly at Kashimo, a sinister gleam flashing in its eyes. The cockroach swarm began to surge once more, but this time, instead of rushing straight at Kashimo, they began to fall back. Kururushi could see that Kashimo's lightning properties naturally countered its swarm. A normal swarm of cockroaches would be instantly killed by the lightning surrounding his body. If it wanted to break through the opponent's defense, it would have to engage in close combat itself. In the next moment, Kururushi snatched up the Fester life blade in its hand and charged at Kashimo. The blade of that sword had several hollow holes, inside of which countless insect eggs could be faintly seen wriggling. Seeing this scene, the excitement in Kashimo's eyes grew even more intense. He actively rushed toward Kururushi. Kururushi also rushed toward Kashimo at the same time, and the festering life blade in his hand drew an arc in the air. The two collided in the middle of the street. The festering life blade clashed with Kashimo's staff, creating the ringing sound of clashing metal. Too slow. Kashimo laughed maniacally, and his staff bypassed Kururushi's festering life blade to smash onto its chest. Kururushi's body tilted backward, but at the exact moment it was sent flying, the festering life blade in its hand slashed across Kashimo at a tricky angle. The blade cut through Kashimo's skin, leaving a shallow wound on his forearm. The wound was very shallow, and it didn't even bleed much. Looking at the wound on his arm, Kashimo frowned slightly. Insect eggs, huh? Kashimo Hajime did not expect that Kururushi's attack angle was so tricky. To think he could grasp this kind of opportunity to slash me with the blade. Seeing that the insect eggs had been successfully planted into Kashimo's arm, Kururushi let out an excited hiss. According to its experience, as long as a target was scratched by the festering life blade, the insect eggs would hatch within a few breaths, and then devour the prey from inside the body. This human was already dead. In other words, Kururushi had won. However, what Kururushi didn't expect happened next. Kashimo took a deep breath, and the cursed energy inside his body began to surge violently. A massive amount of lightning surged through his body, and the wild electricity directly shocked the eggs that hadn't even hatched yet. In an instant, those insects were fried into charcoal and expelled from the wound by Kashimo's powerful cursed energy. Kururushi's compound eyes widened in shock. It couldn't believe this human actually had a way to neutralize the eggs of the Fester life blade. Not a bad attack. Kashimo said, flexing his arm, but in front of my lightning, your eggs don't have a chance to grow at all. Just as Kashimo was preparing to continue the fight, a sudden attack from a distance interrupted him. A granite blast, trailing light behind them like missiles, bombarded the very street where Kashimo and Kururushi were fighting. Kashimo and the cursed spirit quickly retreated, dodging this attack from an uninvited guest. Following the direction of the attack, Kashimo clearly saw a person standing on a tall building in the distance. The newcomer does not seem friendly. Renji leaped down from the tall building at this moment, landing behind Kashimo, and whispered a reminder. We are the newcomers here. Kashimo gave him an annoyed glare. Renji also looked up toward the direction the attack had been fired from. After seeing the silhouette, he wasn't surprised at all. The person was none other than the ancient jujitsu sorcerers from 400 years ago, Ryu Ishigori. Currently, Ishigori stood on a tall building, his eyes fixed in this direction with excitement, and he shouted loudly. Sweet, so sweet. This aura is just too sweet. This is exactly the kind of opponent I wanted. 1100 horsepower equals 1 Chapter 82, Chapter 82, The Sudden Storm 1294 words. The aftershocks of the battle between Kashimo and Kururushi were still clearly perceived by Ryu Ishigori. In fact, he was far from the only one who noticed. High up in the sky, several hundred meters away, Takako Yuro was also secretly observing them. By utilizing her sky manipulation curse technique, Yuro could turn space into a flat surface, as if she had grabbed a piece of cloth. Not only could she knock opponents away through the grabbed space, but she could also stay suspended in the sky by pulling a flat surface out of the sky, allowing her to stay airborne for extended periods. In the sky, Yuro looked at Kururushi on the street, and a trace of wariness flashed in her eyes. She could usually use her space-tearing technique to deflect the linear attacks of ordinary cursed techniques. However, this move was completely useless against Kururushi. Kururushi's army of cockroaches could continuously crawl forward along the space she tore. No matter how she distorted space, Yuro couldn't stop the advance of the cockroach army. Therefore, Yuro preferred to stay far away from anywhere Kururushi was present. Right now, because of Ishigori's sudden intrusion, the originally natural battle on the street has begun to turn chaotic. Ryu Ishigori, who craved dessert, directly took on a 1-against-3 battle without any fear, unleashing his granite blast all by himself at the three enemies, Rinji, Kashimo, and Kururushi. Under the bombardment of Ishigori's granite blast, the buildings on both sides of the street shattered one after another. As he blasted away, Ishigori laughed wildly on the spot. "Hey, hey, hey. Don't disappoint me now. Let me taste even more sweetness." Rinji, who was being constantly disrupted by the granite blast, looked helplessly in Ishigori's direction. "I've got to interrupt this man. If I let him keep shooting like this, he's going to satisfy his appetite completely." Now, Rinji could somewhat sympathize with how Sukuna felt when facing Ishigori on the battlefield during the last challenge. Even though the damage wasn't that serious, having something constantly buzzing around you was incredibly annoying. However, just as he was about to rush over and close the distance with Ishigori, Kururushi wasn't about to let him leave so easily. Taking advantage of the moment Rinji dodged one of Ishigori's granite blasts, Kururushi used the opportunity to slip behind Rinji. To Kururushi, whether it was Kashimo, Rinji, or the newly arrived Ishigori, they were all targets to be killed. Since Kashimo's technique countered him to some extent, Kururushi decided to start with Rinji, who seemed like a perfectly ordinary jujitsu sorcerer. Kururushi stared at him, raised his festering life blade high, and slashed directly at his shoulder. Seeing Kururushi suddenly appear in front of him, Rinji looked helplessly at Kashimo. "Kashimo, you were supposed to keep the enemy's attention focused on you to protect me. How did you let it get away? Now the enemy is coming straight for me instead." Seeing that Rinji was still spacing out even when the attack was right in front of his face, a flash of anger crossed Kururushi's face. With absolute rage, Kururushi slashed down his first strike at him, and it hacked squarely onto Rinji's shoulder. However, Rinji stood frozen on the spot, completely unfazed, while Kururushi's festering life blade didn't even scratch his skin. Looking at his completely unharmed shoulder, Rinji looked at Kururushi with an expression of disappointment. "Is your strength really this pathetic? I was actually looking forward to testing out your parasitic insect eggs." In the sky, Yuro, who hid behind the folded space, stood up in disbelief. As the former captain of the Sun, Moon, and Stars squad from 1,000 years ago, she recognized Rinji's method of blocking Kururushi's attack at a single glance. He used an excessive amount of cursed energy to reinforce his own body. Cursed energy can be coded onto the body or weapons to increase defense, but the difficulty of increasing that defense depends on the object itself. It was very difficult for a body to build up defense because the enemy's attack would also carry cursed energy. It is simply a clash of output and efficiency. If both sorcerers have equal amounts of cursed energy, the attacker's strike usually pierces the defender's reinforcement. Therefore, under normal circumstances, Jujitsu sorcerers usually choose to coat their weapons with cursed energy for defense, and very few people directly apply it to their bodies. Yuro dominated the Jujitsu world for so many years, and she only ever saw one person who would do this. Yet, Rinji now directly used his own body to block a strike from Kururushi, which meant there was only one explanation for this situation. The cursed energy inside Rinji's body vastly exceeded Kururushi's. This is impossible." Yuro muttered in disbelief. She could tell that Kururushi was a special grade cursed spirit, and its cursed energy wasn't much different from hers. Yet under these circumstances, Renji still directly used cursed energy reinforcement to block Kuroroshi's attack. Seeing its attack fail, Kuroroshi didn't even have time to process his shock before he saw Renji's hand reaching out to grab it. Kuroroshi felt a shock in its heart, and immediately prepared to pull out its blade and retreat. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Renji's speed was extremely fast. Just as its hand lifted up, Kuroroshi's own head was grabbed by a pair of powerful large hands. Kuroroshi attempted to use his wings to fly away, but he found that his head seemed fixed in place, and he couldn't fly up at all. Renji looked down at Kuroroshi in his grasp. The cursed energy in his palm gathered rapidly, and a massive amount of positive and negative electrical charges poured into Kuroroshi's body. In the next instant, the positive and negative charges reacted inside Kuroroshi. After a few moments, a violent explosion erupted from it. In just a split second, Kuroroshi's body blew apart completely starting from the head, and he vanished from the world entirely. It's just a pity that I still don't know how to output RCT externally, otherwise I could directly input positive energy to send Kuroroshi to his reincarnation just like Okatsu did. After watching Kuroroshi get exorcised by Renji, Kashimo frowned and looked at him. Didn't we agree to let me handle it? Why did you go and exorcise him anyway? I couldn't help it. Renji shrugged helplessly. Why did you stop distracting the enemy and let him get away? He ran all the way over to me. It would be unfair not to defend. Looking at Kashimo, Renji promised, tell you what, don't worry, I will let you go first against the next opponent, and I guarantee I won't interfere. Yes, yes. As long as you can hold him down and keep him from coming after me. As Renji and Kashimo chatted, a bead of cold sweat slid down Ishigori's forehead. He touched his face in disbelief. Is this sweat? No, it's raining. He looked up at the sky. After a few moments, the sky had turned dark, and a drizzling rain was falling. So it's just rain. I was wondering why I was sweating before the fight even started. As Renji had to exorcise Kuroroshi just now, he had briefly stopped suppressing the cursed energy inside his body. In that single instant, the boundless pressure of his cursed energy instantly swept across the entire colony. The originally clear and sunny Sendai colony even turned a bit gloomy under the pressure of Renji's cursed energy. Ishigori forced a tense smile onto his face as he looked toward Renji. No, 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 no. This guy, isn't he a bit too sweet? 1,100 horsepower equals 1 chapter. Chapter 83, Chapter 83, Domain Battle 13:03 words in the middle of the street, Kashimo looked up at the rain dripping from the sky and frowned. Why is it raining out of nowhere? What a pain. The lightning on Kashimo's body was different from Renji's situation. Renji possessed the ability to convert cursed energy into lightning, and could convert it whenever he wanted. However, Kashimo was different in that his electricity was an inherent trait of his cursed energy. He had no way to control his cursed energy so as not to carry electricity. If he fell into water, Kashimo's cursed energy would leak out uncontrollably like an electrical short circuit due to the water's conductivity. Therefore, a rainy day was not good weather for Kashimo. Even though it would not go so far as to drain all his cursed energy, as long as the rainwater touched his body, Kashimo's leak of cursed energy was bound to happen. Hearing Kashimo's complaints, Renji also shook his head. Yeah, this weather really is strange. Even though Renji's face was completely expressionless, what Kashimo didn't know was that the clouds in the sky had been summoned by Renji himself using his cursed energy. Taking advantage of the rainwater from the sky, Renji briefly washed away Kuroroshi's blood from his hand. Looking at Kuroroshi's body, which hadn't disappeared from the ground yet, Renji suddenly recalled the scene from the original timeline where Yuta killed Kuroroshi. Just thinking about Kuroroshi's appearance made Renji admire Yuta's ability to put his mouth on it. You truly are something else, Okatsu. Suddenly, Renji sensed that someone other than Ishigori was watching him. He abruptly turned his head up toward the sky, and a flash of pink hair darted across the air. After connecting the sky and the pink hair, a name instantly entered his mind. Is that Takako Yuro? What is she hiding from? Sukuna isn't even here, so why doesn't she come out and show herself? Don't tell me she's planning to ambush us while Ryu Ishigori and I are locked in battle. That is just way too despicable. Renji constantly speculated about her in his mind, completely unaware that she hid out of fear precisely because of him. In the sky, Yuro used her cursed technique to grab a piece of the sky to cover her body, and her whole self curled into a ball in fear. Unlike jujitsu sorcerers from 400 years ago, like Ryu Ishigori and Kashimo Hajime, as one of the few jujitsu sorcerers from 1,000 years ago, Yuro legitimately saw the king of curses, Ryomen Sukuna. She was someone who had actually seen Sukuna, and could truly grasp how terrifyingly powerful he was. That was an existence that ordinary jujitsu sorcerers could absolutely not challenge. After sensing the cursed energy Renji released earlier, Yuro had almost deactivated her sky manipulation out of panic. How is this person's cursed energy so similar to Sukuna's? In that single instant, Yuro recalled the suffocating dread of being dominated by Sukuna. After she saw Renji glance in her direction, she was so scared that she curled up even tighter. She didn't even dare to make eye contact with Renji for even a single second. She utilized her curse technique again to pull open a crack in space. After confirming that Renji didn't continue to look at her, Yuro said nothing more and directly ran away as fast as her legs could carry her. Yuro's flight caught the attention of Renji and Kashimo on the street. He looked up with confusion at Yuro's rapidly shrinking figure in the sky. Why is she running away? Kururushi is already dead, so why isn't she making a move? In the original timeline, after Yuta Okatsu killed Kururushi, she made a move right away. Renji saw that she fought quite enthusiastically back then. Shaking his head, he looked forward at Ishigori. Anyway, the rule to freely enter and exit hasn't been added to the colony yet. It'll be the same if I go look for her after finishing my fight with Ishigori. He stretched his body and looked with concern at Kashimo beside him. Kashimo, this rain came at a bad time. Why don't you go take cover from the rain first, and let me handle him? Don't even think about it. Kashimo objected instinctively. We agreed that I go first, don't you dare go back on your word. Fine, 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 you go first, you go first. Renji raised his hands in surrender and took 2 steps back. As Ishigori watched the 2 people below discuss who would deal with him first as if no one else was around, the veins on his forehead bulged. Oi, oi, oi. Aren't you 2 looking down on me a bit too much? He crossed his arms over his chest, and a dazzling ball of cursed energy gathered on his cannon pompadour. I am Ryu Ishigori. Before his voice could even fade, a blast of cursed energy erupted from his palm, ripping through the rain and blasting toward the 2 of them. An excited glint flashed through Kashimo's eyes. He stomped his right foot heavily on the ground, and his entire self turned into a flash of lightning to charge straight against the beam. Come at me. The 2 collided in the street. The Nioi staff and the granite blast intertwined, and each clash erupted into bursts of roars. Renji stood below, raised his head to watch the battle between the 2, and couldn't help but nod. As expected of powerhouses from their era, they're fighting quite intensely. He looked up at the sky again. It looks like Kashimo isn't completely countered by the rainy day either. It's just a light rain, and it seems like it doesn't have much of an impact. The battle between Kashimo and Ishigori grew increasingly intense. The 2 fought from midair down to the ground, and from the ground up to the top of the ruined buildings. Sweet, sweet. Ishigori laughed loudly, continuously firing granite blasts from his hands. Give me more. An electricity crackled around Kashimo as he swung his staff with ferocious speed, deflecting the incoming blasts one by one. Is long-range attack all you've got? Of course not. Ishigori looked at Kashimo with an excited glint in his eyes. The continuous intense combat just now had allowed him to experience the flavor of sweetness for the first time in a long while. He could also tell that Kashimo's cursed energy seemed to be affected by the weather. As the strongest sorcerer of the Mutsu region from 400 years ago, Ishigori didn't want to take advantage of Kashimo in this kind of situation. He looked at Kashimo. "You hate rainy weather, don't you?" Kashimo frowned, instinctively assuming that Ishigori wanted to utilize the weather to create a combat environment that favored him. However, Ishigori didn't seem to mean that at all. "If that's the case, let's create a battlefield without rain. I don't want to take unfair advantage of you." In the next instant, Ishigori forcefully raised his right hand and struck his own chest. "Let me witness your strongest form." A surge of cursed energy rose from Ishigori. As a battle veteran, Kashimo immediately recognized that this was the precursor to a domain expansion. Kashimo instantly understood what Ishigori meant by his words just now. The space occupied by a domain is a specialized space that does not connect with the outside world. Therefore, even if it was pouring rain outside, as long as a domain was expanded, the inside of the domain would be completely unaffected. Wait a minute. Kashimo wanted to stop Ishigori's movements, but it was already too late. Domain expansion, dessert, hollow wicker basket. 1100 horsepower equals 1 chapter. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Novels Wonderland.